All right, so this package is, it changed a little bit last year. Changed a lot more this year, I think. Like I said, on the instruction sheet, you have like your normal stuff explaining how to do each form. But I've also, I added very detailed instructions for this new form I'm going to go over. But I also have a glossary of key terms for some of the things that you may not be as familiar with on the package. And all of this is in that manual I keep talking about, but if you want to just reference them while you're going through the package, you can do that. So I'm not going to read all this, but just want to make sure you're aware. Package is also going to be due on September 13th this year, which should give everyone another week. I know we kind of have 3 difficult packages due the same day. I think it's AP grants in this one. So I was going to give everyone another week for this one, but we ended up actually moving all 3 of them. So unfortunately, you're still all due the same day, but you do have another week. So this is the sample that's on our website. It was already filled out and I'm spending time typing. Signature sheet is the same as all our other ones. We'll start with the questionnaire. Even though it's filled out, I am going to go through and show you all the different variations that we have for all the questions, because every question, or just about every question, is most likely going to have this blue instruction pop up for some answer you made, or one of the variations of answers. So almost every agency is going to put yes to this first one, but our legislative agencies would put no, and they'd have to fill out this form. For this form, I'm not going to actually go over in this training because we don't have that many legislative agencies. And I do talk to most of them on a pretty regular basis. But if any of you are in this training or watch the training later and you want some help with this, please call me and I can help you with anything about this form that you need help with. We'll change that back to yes. Second one is, did your agency perform an inventory of its capital assets during the fiscal year? Hopefully you're putting yes to that question. If you don't, you're going to have to give me an explanation as to why you didn't. I don't personally do anything with this information other than let the auditors know you didn't do an inventory. I think it's very critical you do this inventory. I can't emphasize that enough. I've had agencies not just doing the inventory, but doing it well. I had some agencies that suddenly just found hundreds of very large items that they'd had for years that weren't on the books, and good inventory would have caught that. That's kind of a headache for everybody, me, skis, and your agency. So please try to do these correctly. The next 2 questions are about that inventory. You didn't find everything, you put no. But yes, you did. That one doesn't have any variation in a drop down. A blue instruction that pops up. If you didn't make all the adjustments, you'll have to fill out another form over here that I'll get to. But if you did, you wouldn't get that. If you had NA, you wouldn't get that. Now, this is the question that's, it's kind of, yeah, it's new for this year. I still have this one. I have noticed that the AUC balance at some agencies is not what it's supposed to be. Agencies are not capitalizing projects once they're completed. And I don't just mean like they didn't capitalize them before the year is over, like the years have passed. Or they have some things in there that they realize needed to be expensed and they just haven't expensed them. But whatever it is, we have a new form for this now because I want to get this cleaned up and I want to make sure that we don't have that issue going forward. So if you have any assets under construction, which this is one of the things that you can click on and get a definition of what AUC means. You're going to put yes. There's a specific GL account I got here to let you know if you need to you look at that to see if you have a balance. Hopefully you know that already, but just in case you don't. So you put yes, you'll get that. No, you won't have to do anything. Were there any capital projects substantially complete at June 30th that were not moved from AUC? Now, this is a question we already had, but it's changing a little bit because of this new form. I have yes, and it tells you that you're going to use that form to document this. When you put no, you wouldn't get that, or NA, you wouldn't get that. And substantially complete is also defined in that glossary. This is one that changed last year. Before you had to report any donation or contribution you got, but I've changed it where you only need to report it if you have not recorded it in skis. So hopefully that's saving some people a little bit of time. But we'll say if you're recording skis and for some reason you didn't use the right GL account, you may still want to contact me. But otherwise, you can just put no, because you recorded it or you didn't have any. If you had them and you didn't record them, put yes. You're going to have to provide me with documentation with details about that donation. If you had any intangible assets that meet the capitalization threshold, but you didn't record them in skis, but yes, I think this is something we have a whole lot. But no, you won't have to do anything. And 10, this is kind of just really hammering it home to make sure we aren't missing anything. But if you have any other assets that you place in service and you didn't record them in skis that weren't AUC or intangible asset, you put yes. Yeah, you'd have to give me documentation for that as well. I don't think we run into that a whole lot. Number 11, this is another question we had before. I don't think it was 11, but in the past, if you had any intrastate transfers of capital assets, you had to fill out a form. Even though I've added a new form this year, I got rid of that form. If you're a legislative agency, you're going to still have to report this to me. But everyone else, you will not need to report that to me as long as you recorded it in skis properly. If you did not record it in skis as a transfer, you're going to have to give me some documentation. You won't be using that form anymore. You'll just have to provide your own spreadsheet or Word document, whatever you want to use. And this is what I was talking about earlier. If you have any collections of works of art or historical treasures that aren't capitalized, but yes, you don't have to give me that document. You have to give me every year. That's kind of annoying to deal with. But no, you don't have to do anything. $13 is the new question based on that new policy I discussed earlier. This is just to make sure that if we had any agencies that didn't contact me earlier like they should have, you're still letting me know at least at the end of the year. Now, this would just be for purchases you made during that fiscal year. as I mentioned before, I'd like you to call me as soon as you know about the purchase. It doesn't matter if it's for this fiscal year or next fiscal year. We still need to discuss it. But for this reporting package specifically, I just need to know about anything you may have not told me about. And even if you did tell me about it, I still need you to put yes, because we're going to still want to document it for the auditors and let them know, hey, we discussed this. I was already told this. This is what it is. And we're not capitalizing it. Or we did capitalize it, whatever the outcome was. I don't remember if that was yes or no originally. I guess I'll find out in a second. SKI's report evaluation. This is something I think agencies can get a little confused about. But basically, you're comparing your asset module or your ZGLA and SKIs to the BW capital or asset history report that we're going to send you. I think it's going to go out on September 3rd. And it goes out so late because the depreciation runs and SKIs are a little delayed. So all of that information isn't final until September 1st. This is a report that everyone can generate on their own. All of our reports that we send out, you can generate on your own. But if you do that, please make sure that you either wait until September 1st or you go back and make sure there isn't anything that's changed. So first thing, that report that we send you, you just need to review it and make sure it's complete and accurate. It doesn't give you any other instructions if not, but still something I need to know about because it should be. 15, if your acquisitions and your transfers on the asset history report equal the debits reported in the 1801 accounts, and that doesn't include AUC or your low value asset GL accounts. In DGLA, you would put yes. This tab over here, which will tell you to do. The next one's the same, except it's retirements and transfers compared with the credits in DGLA. This one is the beginning balance for asset history report, and you're comparing that with the asset history module in SKIs. That's a specific SKIs code for it. I've never seen where this is different, but for some reason it was. You need to put in a help desk ticket number. That's something I can help you with, but I do want to be aware of it. Question 18. Does your acquisition value equal that on the report? Like, again, I've never seen that before, but that's another one you have to do a help desk ticket if you run into that. And finally, did you identify any adjustments needed to the beginning balance? This is another one that's going to prompt you to fill out another form, which I do have stuff on there for. This commitment section is another one that has some changes to it this year. Before, we just had capital project commitments, repair and maintenance, and software development. We've had to expand that a little, and most of that's because of leases and SBITAs, but I've also added something for purchases of capital assets because I realized you could be buying some things that you aren't getting constructed or developed that can be pretty substantial. So this goes through all these categories and pretty extensive explanations for everything on the instructions tab. But this first one is basically, you know, your regular construction of buildings in most cases.
Layla, can you increase the screen to 120, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I did lost my train of thought. Yeah, so the next one is repair and maintenance commitments. So even though those aren't capitalized, we still need to report them. That's just a financial reporting requirement. The next one is the software development that was already there last year, but you got to make sure that if you have a SBITA that you have under construction, you don't put that in that category. And then we have one for SBITA, have one for lease assets, and we have one for those purchases that I was talking about. And a good example of this is, I think an agency was purchasing, or a couple different agencies were purchasing a lot of cubicles. It was substantial. And that's really something we need to be disclosing in our notes on the ACFR. And up here it goes into a little more detail so you understand exactly what a commitment is, because I think there's confusion with that sometimes too. But any amounts you've already paid, you're not going to report any of that here. It's just stuff that you have a contract in place, you've committed to paying it in the future, but you haven't yet paid it. And for this one specifically, I don't think I'll probably run into that for the other ones. Maybe repair and maintenance. You need to exclude any retainage that you may have. And that's defined on the other tab as well. The impairment of assets, I don't think this is hardly ever used except by one agency. But this is, you have significant unexpected decline in the service utility in the event circumstances causing the decline or outside the normal life cycle of the capital asset. So most commonly, this is going to be something like you had a hurricane or a fire, or someone drove into your building. Actually, I had someone mention that to me too. That could lead to potential impairment of an asset. If you have impairment, that still doesn't mean we necessarily need to do anything. So that's why we have these follow-up questions. But if for some reason you have it and you're not going to use the asset anymore, then, you know, but no, we don't need any more information. If you put no here, it'll also tell you you can stop here. You don't have to keep filling out anything else. But for our example here, their park ranger station, which was a large log cabin, got impaired. They had a fire that damaged the exterior and some of the rooms. So they provide how much the historical cost, the accumulated depreciation at the time of the impairment, any cost you incurred to restore it to the asset being functional again. That can be capitalized, you put here. Anything you can't capitalize, you put here. And then you also need to provide any insurance proceeds you received due to the damage of the asset. So that's it for the questionnaire. Does anyone else have questions about the questionnaire before I go through the forms? Okay, so someone asked to clarify what information is reported in 21D. Okay, which would be the SBITA asset commitments. So the this is actually something we do currently have, and this is how we figured out we needed to add some of these things. There are some agencies that even though they're leasing software, they're also paying to get it constructed. So if you have something that you're paying to get it constructed, and after it is constructed, it's going to be a SBITA, that you're not going to own it. That's what you would report in this category. And one thing I forgot to mention is you're only reporting things that are over 100,000, and that's by category. But if you have anything less than 100,000 in any category or per category, you don't have to report that. Any other questions? Okay. This is just an example of some of the additional information you could provide if you had one of those weird things. If you had donations, this is what you need to provide to me so I can get that recorded properly. If you have the works of art and historical treasures, you just put your reasoning and what it is, the dollar amount of it. And for this one, I did add an example of a purchase of a group of similar assets. So they bought 600 pieces of playground equipment at $4,500 each, bringing the total to $3 million, around that amount. They gave you the document number for the purchase and gave you the date of the purchase. And that's pretty much all you need to give me for that. For that particular question, I'm probably still going to be calling you about it, even if you're telling me for the first time in this package. But I've instructed the few agencies that contacted me to please still report this in the package. So again, we can have it for any auditor purposes, auditing purposes. So this form 3.08.3 is used to report adjustments you need to make that you didn't get made in SKIS before fiscal year end. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. Tammy, this is a great question. We did have confusion in FY23 about the SBITA CIP and reporting it in the miscellaneous loss package. This has changed. The miscellaneous loss package has that in the instructions. I also added something to the manual about this. You will not report those, anything that relates to a capital asset, please report it on this package. Do not report any capital asset related commitments or repairs and maintenance commitments on that miscellaneous loss and commitments reporting package. If having any you're unsure about, you can call me or email the ACRA inbox. Okay, so back to this form. So they had an asset that they located during their inventory. They haven't used it in years. And they decided they needed to retire it. So they did that during, I guess, shortly after the inventory. So they're going to tell me what we have in SKIS as the historical cost and what it needs to be, and let me know that this is a retirement. They'll do the same thing for accumulated depreciation. They had a couple donated assets that they didn't record in SKIS, which is also in the donations tab, but it's helpful if you also report it here. So they gave me the amounts of what I need to add to SKIS for that donation because it would be an acquisition. And they have a couple things from their AUC form that also need to be adjusted in skis. One of them was something that's in the balance that needs to be expensed, and something that related to a prior year that should have been capitalized. And wait, sorry, I don't think that relates to the other form, but it was a replacement that occurred in FY23 and should have never been capitalized, so it needs to be expensed. So they're gonna report to me that they want to take this off the books. I've had agencies, sometimes the questions may not capture every situation, but there may be something you need to adjust for whatever reason. You can call me and ask me if it's something you should report, and I'll let you know if it needs to go on this form and what I need you to report to me. This is our new form for this AUC balance stuff. Like I said, I would recommend reading those instructions at the beginning before you get started. And I added, kind of like the other page, explanations for some of these that may not be intuitive. First thing you're going to do is put the balance of your AUC ending balance from your asset history sheet here. And then the balance per skis ZGLA here. And make sure that they're the same, which that kind of relates to one of our other questions, but sometimes the agencies don't always do all the categories. So I want to make sure we're getting it for this one specifically. I would prefer it for all of them though. So this first one instance, just like you to use a number for each project. So you might have several lines because there's maybe different phases, or you have different funding sources, whatever. If you're having to use multiple lines, just try to use the same number so I kind of know that they're all one project. You'll just put the name of the project. You don't have to get super detailed, but a little detail can help, and it may prevent me from asking you questions later. Something I need to know a little more about. You'll give an anticipated completion date. Sometimes you don't have an exact date, so you can do April 2029. We even do something like spring 2029, whatever. If you have one that you've already completed, and we need to get out of here, you'll put the date that it was completed. And that's something that is explained when you click on this. I need you to give me the WBS element for the project. I'm not an expert on this, but it's my understanding that you could have some situations potentially where you don't have that element. I'm not fully sure why, but if for some reason you don't, you can leave it blank. You'll need to give me the fund. Like I said, if you're using multiple funding sources, I need to have that broken out on each line separately. And then the current capitalization amount is just the balance in that GL account at the time for this project that will be capitalized once the project is completed. And this is just so if you have anything in there that needs to be expensed, you can put it over there and keep it separately. But the total of these should be the total for this funding source of the project. You're going to put what asset class it's going to be once it's completed, and that's the drop down. And this calculates automatically, but please make sure it's adding up right. There's a comment box, just if there's anything you need to share, or for things that require an adjustment, you can give some more information there. And if you have any on here that you need adjustments, you don't necessarily have to report them here too. It's helpful. But if you only report them here, that's fine too. Yeah, so this one, we had one where they included some things that were low value assets and they need to get that out of the balance. So they're reporting that to me so I can take it out. And then this is one that they had already completed before the fiscal year end, but they didn't know about it until after. And so it needs to be moved to a different asset class. And this is the HVAC replacement we were talking about earlier that was in there and needs to be taken out because it needs to be expensed. This is kind of long, but at the very bottom, it calculates the grand total of everything you give me. And then it takes that AUC balance from up here. If there's a variance, you'd have something come up here that would tell you you need to get your numbers right so they agree. It's not going to be accepted if they don't agree. This requires you to fully reconcile all your projects and make sure you know what everything is. And hopefully for most agencies, that's not an issue. But I have a feeling there might be a few that it is. So for those, this might be a bit of a headache now, but it needs to be done, and hopefully it'll make it where it's not a headache going forward. This last one relates to that section where we were comparing the asset history report to the GL. If you have any variances, this is where you report them. And you'll just give a detail of, why the variance is there. A lot of times it has to do with you did some kind of journal entry in SKIS and the asset module may not always pick those up. So if you have something like that, try to include a document number for me. That's really helpful. I don't know that I've really seen any that weren't like that. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. And if you have any where you just have no idea what's going on, please call me and I'll try to help you, or we'll work together with SKIS to try to understand what's happening. And then the viewer checklist, I'm not going to go through this. I just recommend that you please read each question and make sure you're really answering it and reviewing everything properly. I do want to open the floor for questions. And I will mention again, capital assets is a lot. There's probably some things I have not covered. If you really wanted to, you could probably talk about this for 3 or 4 hours. It can get pretty complicated. I mean, it's a lot of weird situations, but they don't really apply to everyone. But I wanted to try to go over most things, just in case you have something come up in the future that maybe you don't normally have. I don't know if any of the legislative agencies are in here. I know your package is due the same time as everyone else's, but if any of you guys are in here, we would greatly appreciate it if you submitted yours early, because you're not in SKIS, so you do not need to wait until September to do yours. And all of yours do require special adjustments, so it would be very helpful to get them earlier if you can.
Layla, can you put the screen up that has your contact information on it?
Yeah, I'm real quick. Before I do that, I'm going to just show a couple things in the manual I've been talking about. That has the new policy on it. And this has all our thresholds and talks about that group stuff. This is that flow chart I was talking about. If you aren't really sure how to handle a capital asset. And this is our list of different asset classes and specific examples. If you have anything that is specific, I would really stick to this range at list and not try to use the general range for the whole category. Just because you might have an issue with an auditor. But otherwise, you can use the general range for that specific asset class. And this also has a glossary that has some of those terms defined. And then there's a whole section, like all our other packages, for the specific capital asset section. But this one's a little longer and goes into historical cost, software capitalization. Some of it's kind of not useful because everyone has to use straight line for depreciation. It's just the default setting in skis.